Welcome back, friends. So let me ask you something. Have you ever met someone who just knows things? Someone who picks up a tarot deck for the first time and somehow pulls the exact card that makes you go, okay, how did you do that? Or maybe that someone is you, and you're sitting here wondering how to get started, how to develop that knowing, and whether you need to drop $50 on a gorgeous deck or a crystal ball before any of it counts. Today's answer is absolutely not. Here's the thing nobody tells baby witches when they are just starting out. Divination isn't really about the tool. The tool is just a language, a framework, a way of quieting down all of that mental noise so that you hear what's already there. Scott Cunningham, one of the most beloved writers in modern witchcraft, put it beautifully. He described magic and divination as a natural part of life, accessible to anyone willing to practice and pay attention. Not a gift reserved for the chosen few, not something you have to earn or be born into, just a skill, like any other, that grows with attention and intention. Patricia Telesco, in her work on everyday magic, echoes that. She talks about using what you have, the ordinary objects of daily life, as powerful vehicles for insight. And DJ Conway reminds us that divination, in its oldest forms, was never fancy. It was fire and water and smoke and the patterns and things that humans already lived with every day. So today, we are going to honor that tradition. We're breaking down the major divination tools, what they are, how they work, and which one might actually be right for you as a beginner. And then we are going deep on candle divination specifically, because it is one of the most accessible, most ancient, and honestly, most underrated forms of divination out there. No special gift required, no expensive equipment, just a candle you probably already own. Grab yourself a cuppa, settle in, let's get into it. Now before we get into tools, let's ground ourselves in what divination actually is, because there's a lot of mystique around the world, and some of it gets in the way. Divination, at its core, is the practice of seeking insight about the past, present, or future through symbolic or intuitive means. The word itself comes from the Latin divinare, meaning to foresee or to be inspired by a god. But you don't have to be religious or even spiritual in any particular way to use divination effectively. Think of it like this. Your brain is constantly processing far more information than your conscious mind can handle. Divination gives that deeper processing a way to surface. When you focus on a question and then interpret a symbol, a card, a flame, a shape in wax, you're essentially giving your intuition permission to speak. You're creating a structured moment of reflection. DJ Conway describes divination as tapping into the flow of probability. The idea that the future isn't fixed, but that patterns exist, and those patterns can be read. Telesco frames it similarly. Divination helps us understand the energy around a situation so we can make more informed choices. It's guidance, not gospel. That framing matters, especially for beginners. Divination is not about predicting the future. It's not about handing over your agency to the cards or the flame or the stars. It's about having a conversation with your higher self, with the universe, with whatever divine or natural forces you believe in, and using that conversation to navigate your life more wisely. Okay, with that said, let's talk tools. There are so many forms of divination out there, and I want to give you a real overview before we focus in on candles, because understanding the landscape helps you figure out which tool resonates with you, and that is the real goal here. Tarot cards are probably the most well-known in modern witchcraft spaces. A traditional tarot deck has 78 cards, 22 major arcana, and 56 minor arcana. The major arcana deals with the big life themes, spiritual lessons, major transitions, archetypes. The minor arcana is more about the day-to-day stuff, divided into 4 suits that typically correspond to the elements. Now, I have to address this because it comes up constantly. No, you absolutely do not have to be gifted your first deck. That's a lovely tradition, but it is not a rule. Go buy the deck that calls to you. And while we're at it, no, the devil card is not literally about the devil. And the death card does not mean someone is going to die. The death card is about transformation, endings, and necessary change. It's the Tower card you should be bracing yourself for. Just saying. Oracle cards are a little different from tarot in that they don't follow a set structure. Each oracle deck is its own system, created by its maker. Someone once told me that you use tarot cards when you want to know what to do about a situation. Oracle cards show you what you have to do. There is more urgency and direction with oracle cards in my experience. The spirit board, also called a Ouija board, although that name is trademarked by Hasbro, gets the most stigma of anything on this list. And honestly, most of that stigma comes from horror movies and board game manufacturers, not practice. A spirit board is simply a tool for communication. It slows down your small, unconscious muscle movements and externalizes them so that they can be read. That being said, it is a tool that benefits from clear intention setting and grounding, especially for beginners. If you're not in a good headspace, maybe reach for something else that day. A little side note about my spirit board. Yes, I do have one. No, I do not find it to be overly effective for communicating with spirits. I actually bought this one for my kid who was interested in spirit communication from a young age. It comes with a whole host of rules, which is why they don't really use it. There's a lot of housekeeping and energy cleansing that need to go along with any spirit board. Runes are an ancient Germanic alphabet with a rich divinatory tradition. Each rune carries a set of meanings, both literal and symbolic, and they're typically cast or drawn for readings. Runes are found in many Northern European traditions, and their simplicity belies their depth. If you are on a Norse path, or just like working with symbols and can commit to learning a system, runes are deeply rewarding. The pendulum is one of the simplest tools to start with, and one of the oldest forms of dowsing. A pendulum is just a weighted object on a string. And yes, a necklace with a pendant absolutely counts. You calibrate it to your own energy, usually by asking it to show you yes and no movements, and then ask your questions. It's fantastic for binary questions. Yes or no, this or that, this path, that path. Folk magic traditions have long used pendulums to divine all sorts of things, including whether a baby would be a boy or a girl. I'll note that one comes from a long tradition of assigning gender at birth and is really just about biological sex, not anything to do with gender identity, but I mention it because it's historically significant to pendulum work. Pendulums are also frequently used instead of a planchette with spirit boards. Dowsing is a cousin to pendulum work. It's the practice of using a forked stick or rods to locate things. Water, energy lines, lost objects. It's old, like genuinely ancient, and it still works for a lot of people today. Palmistry is the reading of the lines, mounds, and shapes of the hand. It's a full system unto itself. You can spend years studying palmistry and still be learning. But at its most basic, it's wonderfully accessible. Your hands are always with you, and learning a few key lines can give you a framework for self-reflection anytime. Scrying is the practice of gazing into a reflective or translucent surface until images or impressions arise. Mirrors, bowls of water, crystals, even a dark computer screen. All of these can be used for scrying. It requires a relaxed meditative state and some practice at letting your eyes soften and defocus. Water scrying is one of the most ancient forms, practiced across cultures and centuries. The images you receive are often symbolic rather than literal, and interpretation comes with time. Crystal balls are essentially a specific form of scrying tool. They're beautiful, they're iconic, and yes, you can absolutely use a smaller, more affordable one and get genuine results. The Magic 8 Ball, and yes, I'm including this with my whole chest, is technically a toy. But I also believe that intention is everything, and if you focus clearly on your question and really put some thought into that little icosahedron floating within the blue dye, it counts. We work with what we have. That is the tradition. I mean, if you can buy a Ouija board and use it, you can use a Magic 8 Ball. Tea leaf reading, or tassomancy, is the practice of reading the shapes left by loose tea leaves or coffee grounds in the bottom of a cup after drinking. It is intimate, it is meditative, and it has a gorgeous folk magic tradition behind it. Its very ordinariness is part of its power. You are turning a daily ritual into a moment of sacred attention. And finally, candle divination, which is where we're going to spend the rest of our time together today because it is incredible and it is probably one of the most overlooked forms of divination among beginners. Candles have been used in ritual and divination for thousands of years across dozens of cultures. Fire itself is one of humanity's oldest sacred elements. It transforms, it illuminates, it destroys, and creates. Reading that fire and the wax it leaves behind is one of the most intuitive and ancient forms of divination there is. What I love about candle divination, and what makes it so perfect for beginners, is that you don't need to memorize a complex system. You don't need a 78-card vocabulary. You're reading fire. You're reading shape. You're engaging the same part of your brain that finds animals in clouds or faces in everyday objects. That capacity is already in you. I would argue that candlework is one of the most powerful forms of everyday magic precisely because it engages all of your senses. The scent, the warmth, the light, the sound of the flame. All of that contributes to the focused, meditative state that makes good divination possible. Now, let's talk about how to actually do it. First things first, not all candles are created equally for divination purposes, and your choice of candle will shape how you read it. Let me walk you through the most common types. Container candles, like a jar candle or a candle in a tin, are wonderful for longer rituals and sustained readings. They're safe, they're relatively stable, and the container can actually become part of the reading. Pay attention to any residue or smoke marks left on the glass, in the wax after you put out the candle, or on the sides of the tin. You can also note any formations in the wax after you put the candle out as the wax hardens back up. Is there a definite shape there? Pillar candles are freestanding and give you a lot of wax to work with for wax readings. They're sturdy and burn for a long time, which makes them great for extended sessions. Devotional or prayer candles, those tall glass candles you'll find at most grocery stores, often with saints or Catholic imagery, have a long, rich folk magic history, particularly in Latin and Hoodoo traditions. They burn for days and can be used for ongoing readings or workings. Note, most of the ones you get in grocery stores are made of paraffin, which we will get to in a bit here. Taper candles are elegant and versatile. They drip beautifully, which makes them excellent for wax reading specifically. If you want to do a wax interpretation, a taper is one of your best friends. Chime candles are small, burn in about an hour or two, although I recently heard about like a 20-minute candle, and they are often used in spell work. They're great for quick readings, or when you want to ask a specific focused question. Votives are short, wide candles that typically need a holder. They're accessible and affordable, great for beginners. Tea lights are the most accessible candle out there. You can get a bag of 100 for a few dollars. They're good for quick flame readings, although you won't get much wax interpretation from them given their small size. Now, and this matters, what your candle is made of will affect your reading. I would encourage you to use the most natural candle that you can afford. Pure beeswax candles have been used in ritual for centuries and are considered by many practitioners to be the most energetically clean. Soy candles, which is what I use, are a good accessible alternative. Paraffin, which is what most cheap candles are made from, is a petroleum byproduct, and some practitioners feel it creates interference in energetic readings. Scott Cunningham writes about the importance of purity in magical tools. The idea that the less artificial interference there is, the cleaner your connection. This does not mean that you can't use a paraffin tea light in a pinch. It just means work with the best that you have access to and be aware of what you're working with. Scent and color are also worth considering if you are using candles that have those elements. Color correspondences in candle magic are a whole topic unto themselves, but briefly, white is an all-purpose candle and is always appropriate. Black is for banishing and protection. Red is for passion, courage, and vitality. Blue is for calm, healing, and psychic work. Green is for abundance and growth. Purple is for spiritual matters and higher wisdom. When in doubt, white. And if you need a refresher on color magic, we just covered that a couple weeks ago. I will leave a link to that video in the description. Before you begin any candle divination, set your space. Remove any drafts. Close windows, turn off fans, do what you need to do to ensure that the flame's movement is coming from within the working and not from your HVAC system. This is important both for accurate readings and for basic fire safety. Ground yourself. Take a few breaths. Set a clear intention or ask a clear question. Go ahead and light your candle. And then watch. Here's what the flame can tell you. A strong, steady flame is one of the best signs that you can get. It means the energy around your question is clear, the path is open, and you can expect a positive outcome. A well-burning flame is an indicator that your intention has been received and the working is proceeding with ease. A low, dim flame is a caution. It suggests obstacles, delay, or depleted energy. If you are making plans, this flame says slow down or even stop. The conditions aren't favorable right now. It might also be worth checking whether your candle itself is well made. A poorly wicked candle will burn dimly regardless of the energy you bring to it, so use discernment. A wildly flickering flame, after you confirm that there's no draft, indicates incoming change. Something is moving. News is coming. There's a lot of energy and motion around your question. This kind of flame behavior often indicates an active spiritual presence and heightened psychic sensitivity. A flame that goes out quickly requires serious attention. When a cotton wick candle smothers and dies on its own without any apparent cause, pay attention to what comes in the next few days. In my own practice, I cannot think of a time when a spontaneously extinguished cotton wick candle wasn't followed by something significant. Now, that being said, wood wicks are different. Wood wicks are just sometimes a little fussy. They can go out without any particular omen attached. Point, know your tools. A flame that splits into two suggests division, a split outcome, conflicting interests, or two paths with genuinely different consequences. This is your flame telling you that the situation is not as simple as it looks and that there may be competing forces or loyalties at play. A blue flame is something many people consider deeply significant. A blue flame is an indicator of spirit presence, the energy of a guide, an ancestor, or a spiritual ally making themselves known. Some also associate it with very pure, high vibration energy in the working. If you see blue in your flame, take a moment to be present. Something or someone is there with you. That's nothing to be afraid of. A halo around the flame, a sort of glowing ring, can indicate trouble on the horizon. Not necessarily disaster, but something that will require your attention and care. A ring or circle separate from that halo, a distinct circular formation around or near the flame, is traditionally associated with joy, fulfillment, and completion. Think of it like a crown. Something good is coming to its fullness. A vigorously dancing flame, enthusiastic, large, expressive, brings sudden change. Not necessarily bad change, but big energy. Be prepared to move with it rather than against it. Now we come to what I think is the most fun part of candle divination, and truly one of the most accessible forms of scrying there is: reading the wax. Here's how to set up a wax reading. Place a bowl of water underneath your candle, ideally a dark colored or black bowl, which makes the wax shapes easier to see if you're using a white candle, and allow the dripping wax to fall into the water as the candle burns. You can also use floating candles in a bowl of water directly. As the candle hits the water, it cools and hardens into shapes. Your job is to interpret those shapes. This is intuitive work. It's you and your perception, reading meaning from form. Telesco describes this kind of interpretation as the language of symbol, and notes that the images that emerge for you are more meaningful than any standardized dictionary of wax shapes. That being said, some general associations are useful as a starting point. A heart shape, love, connection, relationship matters coming to the fore. A ring or circle means completion, wholeness, or sometimes a literal ring or commitment. An arrow indicates direction, movement. Pay attention to which way it points. A cross can indicate a crossroads, a decision point, or in some traditions, protection. Letters or numbers. Take note of these literally. They often point to names, dates, or specific details. Animals. Use your intuition and traditional symbolic associations. A bird for freedom, for example, or a message. A snake for transformation. A cat for intuition or mystery. If the wax forms a tree, that means growth, deep roots, family, or longevity. If it forms into waves or water shapes, that means emotional matters, flow, change. If you have a mountain or a jagged shape, that means obstacles, but also strength, and the summit is ahead. If you see a spiral in the wax, that means cycles, return, and evolution. The key is to let your eyes soften, the way you would when cloud watching, and let the first impression come before the analytical mind comes in. That first impression is almost always the most accurate. You can also read wax that collects around the candle rather than in water. The shapes that form on a pillar's surface, or the residue left in a container. You can also read wax that collects around the candle rather than in water. The shapes that form on a pillar's surface, or the residue left in a container. If wax collects heavily on one side, that can indicate where energy is concentrated. If a container candle burns cleanly and evenly all the way down, that is generally considered a sign of a successful, unobstructed working. One more thing I want to mention, because it's genuinely useful. You don't have to use candle divination instead of other tools. You can use it alongside them. Lighting a candle before a tarot reading is a beautiful and ancient practice. It signals the beginning of sacred space. It focuses your attention. And if you pay attention to how that candle burns during a reading, the flame becomes another layer of information, confirming, questioning, or adding nuance to what the cards are showing you. Layering magical practices can be a very effective way of deepening the work, not because any one tool is insufficient, but because bringing multiple forms of symbolic language into conversation with each other creates a richer dialogue. Your candle, your cards, your intuition, all speaking the same language from different angles. You can also concentrate a candle specifically for your divination practice. Dress it with oil, charge it with intention, light it at the beginning of every reading session as a way of signaling to your own subconscious and to whatever larger forces you work with that you are entering a focused, receptive state. When you are done with your candle working for the session, there are a few thoughts on how to put it out. Most practitioners suggest that you put out a candle by snuffing it, using your fingers or the blade of a ritual knife if you haven't used one. That way, the magic is not scattered to the corners of the earth before your next working with that candle. If you are on your last working of that candle, you can blow out the candle to release the energy from your workings to the far reaches of the universe. I picked up this candle snuffer behind me a few years back at my favorite local metaphysical store for a few dollars. I would advise that over pinching the flame out with your fingers for safety and pain purposes. So, after all of this, how do you know which divination tool is yours? The honest answer is, you might not know right away, and that is fine. Many practitioners work with several tools over the course of their lives. Some develop a deep primary practice with one tool, and others use others occasionally. Some rotate freely depending on the question or the season. But if you're just starting out, here's what I would suggest. Try candle divination first. Not because it's the best tool, there is no best tool, but because it requires nothing you don't already have. It engages you in a genuinely ancient practice, and it develops the exact muscle you'll need for any other form of divination. The ability to be present, to observe without forcing, and to trust what arises. Light a candle tonight. Ask a question you genuinely want insight on. Watch the flame. See what the wax tells you. Write it down in a journal if you have one. And then, give it some time. See what happens. Like every other part of this path, divination develops over a lifetime. The longer you practice, the more fluent you become. The more fluent you become, the more you'll start to notice that the knowing was always there. The tools just helped you hear it. All right, friends, that is your introduction to divination and your deep dive into candlework. I hope this gives you a genuine foundation to start from, whether you're a complete beginner or someone who's been practicing for a while and just hasn't explored this particular avenue yet. If you want to go deeper on any of the tools we talked about today, I would highly recommend picking up Scott Cunningham's Earth, Air, Fire, and Water, Patricia Telesco's Mastering Candle Magic, or DJ Conway's A Little Book of Candle Magic. All of them have wonderful sections on divination and everyday magical practice. As always, every accusation is a confession. Free Palestine. Protect the First Amendment. Justice for Casey Goodson Jr. I do not have a trial update yet at this time, but it's happening right now. And do not let up on the Epstein files. Survivors deserve accountability and justice. Until next week, friends, take care of yourselves and each other.